we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now.
Donald Trump has made it loud and clear he is fighting fire with fire. As Black Lives Matter protests turn violent across the United States, the president is fighting back with a hardline response to the riots. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. A single tweet enshrines Trump's message. The National Guard was deployed in 24 different states after Trump told governors to put an end to the violence. He doubled down on this heavy-handed approach by threatening to deploy the military if the states failed to suppress the rioting.
We can have our military there very quickly. They've got to be tough, they've got to be strong, they've got to be respected.
The seemingly stone-cold approach might very well be a calculated move to deter more protesters from joining. The president is very likely to be well aware of the images circulating on social media of police pushing back on protesters with full force. Violent as it might be, the hope is that it's the fastest way to put out the fire.
The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups.
So this is not just a case of African Americans, and it is certainly not a case of these mythical extremists at Antifa. You're talking about a broad base of support for these demonstrations to raise issues like equality, like justice, like those incidents where we have had police violence. You've got 65% of Americans who are supporting the protests versus only 20% who oppose them. You have a president who has been seen as mismanaging the coronavirus crisis by a lot of Americans. You have an economy, which was Trump's life raft, #winning, and the economy is in trouble with a real unemployment rate of more than 20%. And you see this apparent inability to try to bring Americans together, the way that a Barack Obama could do, for example. And that means Trump is increasingly reliant on this so-called base that will stick with him come hell or high water. But how big is that base?
In the meantime, his adversaries are taking full advantage of the chaos.
Our country is in pain. People can't get that image of George Floyd having the life choked out of him by a police officer.
It's an opportunity for the Democrats, and particularly presidential candidate Joe Biden, to dissuade voters from re-electing Donald Trump.
George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe." For the president to try to put any other words in the mouths of George Floyd, I frankly think is despicable.
There is a group in the center which doesn't want to go to the extremes, and that group may be growing. So I think it's not only a case that Donald Trump has to rethink what he's doing. I think politicians across the board, not just at federal but at state and local level, have got to rethink this. Because to be honest with you, coming from this country, still having deep links to America, this is the most critical time for the U.S. since 1945. I think Trump's gambling, and I think it's a gamble he could win, but if he wins it, it doesn't even testify as much to Donald Trump as it testifies to an America which I think is a much more divided and a much more insecure place than even the country that I grew up in 30, 40 years ago.